The scene unfolds at a prestigious academic conference. The lights are dimmed as a man named Kendall prepares to take the podium. Kendall is a titan of child psychology, often introduced as the founding father of child anxiety treatments. One might expect a figure of such untouchable authority to radiate a polished, distant professionalism. Instead, he presents himself with profound humility, introducing himself simply as Phil. His address begins as a standard academic retrospective, touching upon decades of research and the success of former students. He even offers a light-hearted remark regarding a colleague's absence. However, the atmosphere shifts abruptly. The warmth vanishes as Kendall stands taller, looking out at the audience of researchers and students. He begins a deliberate, stern critique, wagging his finger to emphasize the gravity of his message. He is no longer the affable colleague. Today, he is Fussy Phil. His mission is to confront a professional sin that has persisted for decades. Despite the high intelligence and advanced degrees within the field, psychology has fundamentally misused its most basic terms, mediators and moderators. This linguistic and logical confusion has compromised the integrity of the science since the late 1990s. This is an indictment of the field's collective sloppiness. If researchers cannot agree on the words used to describe how children recover, they cannot truly understand why a treatment works. The science of change requires a relentless commitment to precision. This moment represents a monumental pivot from a celebrating statesman to a rigorous critic. The stakes are immense. When the blueprints, the very words and concepts used to describe human improvement are flawed, the clinical machinery itself fails. This is not a pedantic exercise in semantics. It is the massive gap between guessing why therapy works and actually knowing. It is the necessary evolution from the alchemy of mixing variables to the chemistry of understanding the molecular bonds of change. This shift toward precision medicine is essential for patients, practitioners, and the scientific community alike. To navigate this journey into the mechanics of psychological science, one must begin exactly where Kendall did, with the distinction between two functionally opposite variables. To the untrained eye, mediators and moderators appear interchangeable as variables that influence outcomes. However, treating them as identical is the root of the professional sin. A moderator answers the questions of for whom or when a treatment is effective. It acts as a fork in the road, representing a variable that typically exists before treatment begins. It characterizes the individual or their specific context. A moderator does not cause change. It dictates the conditions under which change occurs. For instance, in a simplified medical scenario, hydration acts as a moderator for ibuprofen. The medication may be only effective if the patient is hydrated. In a clinical context, consider an individual facing a high-stress event, such as a job loss. The relationship between that stress and subsequent depression is often moderated by coping strategies. A person who possesses resilient coping mechanisms, actively seeking social support and physical exercise, navigates the stress without spiraling. Conversely, an individual with maladaptive coping strategies may isolate and succumb to depression. The coping skill does not cause the stress, nor does the stress cause the skill. The skill acts as a gatekeeper, determining which path the individual takes. In contrast, a mediator represents the how and the why. It is the mechanism, the engine under the hood. For a variable to be a mediator, the treatment must cause the mediator to change, and that change must subsequently cause the outcome. It is a strict causal chain. A causes B, which then causes C. In cognitive behavioral therapy for anxiety, the theory posits that the therapy causes a reduction in rumination, the mediator. This decrease in rumination then causes the patient's anxiety to drop. If the mediator does not move, the outcome remains unchanged. The moderator is the fork in the road. The mediator is a necessary stop along the highway. The failure to distinguish these stems from both clinical laziness and the inherent complexity of data. Researchers frequently find that patients with high baseline anxiety respond poorly to treatment, a moderator finding, yet they erroneously report it as a failure of the mechanism, labeling it a mediator. There is a documented, embarrassing inconsistency in the literature, where the text of a study, its diagrams, and the actual statistical analysis are in total conflict. When the handles of the door are labeled incorrectly, the field wastes decades pushing when it should be pulling, targeting the wrong levers of change. Uncovering the specific gear that drives improvement is a rigorous, almost clinical coldness applied to the warmth of human experience. Critics describe this as performing an autopsy on a sunset. The scientist must dissect the holistic experience of a person healing from trauma, measuring light wavelengths to explain the beauty of the recovery. While this may feel reductionist, it is the only protection against unproven wellness claims. It is how the field ensures the medicine is real. Proving this causal chain requires adherence to the principle of temporal precedence. The cause must occur before the effect. In a linear sequence, the treatment happens, then the mediator changes, and finally, the outcome moves. Yet, many published studies fail this basic logical test. Most research is cross-sectional, measuring variables at the same time. Finding that low negative self-talk correlates with low anxiety at the end of a study does not prove the former caused the latter. They may both have changed due to an external life event. Without measuring the middle step before the outcome, the researcher is merely telling a story. Some researchers attempt to bypass these design flaws using residual gain scores, a mathematical effort to isolate change. However, as Kendall notes, one cannot math their way out of a bad timeline. True mediation research requires dense data, assessing patients weekly or even daily to observe the gear turn before the wheel moves. Beyond timing, the field struggles with the reliability of its measurements. Measurement error acts as static that drowns out the signal of change. Using a vague survey to measure a subtle shift in a patient's psyche is like trying to measure a microscopic change with a broken ruler. This is the reliability paradox, measuring the thing right versus measuring the right thing. Consider the analogy of an onion. The entire onion represents a broad construct like quality of life, which includes physical health, social vitality, and mental clarity. A treatment may be designed specifically to fix one layer, the spark plug of cognition. If a researcher measures the whole onion, the specific improvement in cognition is diluted by the lack of change in physical health or vitality. The average result suggests the treatment failed, even if it worked perfectly on its intended target. This is a type 2 error, a false negative. To solve this, sophisticated latent variable models are used to peel the onion, isolating the specific mechanism from the noise of the broader construct. This precision transitions the focus back to the moderator, the quest for what works for whom. Modern psychiatry is moving toward advanced machine learning and subgroup analysis to identify these forks in the road. For an individual patient, an average result can feel like a personal indictment. A father may feel a sense of failure because a gold standard treatment did not help his daughter. Only when a researcher explains that her specific profile required a different moderator does he find peace. It was not a failure of the child or the parent, but a mismatch of the key to the lock. The current diagnostic system, the DSM, often hinders this precision. It is a categorical polythetic mess. To receive a diagnosis of depression, two patients, Alice and Bob, may share almost no symptoms. Alice may experience hypersomnia and physical heaviness, while Bob suffers from insomnia and agitated anxiety. They are biologically distinct, yet clinical trials lump them together. The resulting average treatment effect is a statistical fiction. A medication might help Alice while worsening Bob's agitation, yet the average suggests the pill is only moderately effective for everyone. It helps no one and misleads everyone. The hierarchical taxonomy of pathology seeks to replace these rigid boxes with dimensions. Instead of a binary diagnosis, it looks at underlying traits like anhedonia or mindfulness. Hidden within these dimensions are the true moderators. A treatment may only work for those low in certain traits regardless of their broad diagnosis. One of the most promising applications of this data is the Personalized Advantage Index. When clinicians cannot yet fully explain the how, they can use math to determine the for whom. In a trial comparing antidepressants to CBT, the average results showed no clear winner. However, by weighing 5 pre-treatment variables, marital status, employment, life events, personality disorders, and medication history, researchers created an algorithm. This formula predicts which treatment offers a significant advantage for a specific individual. For one patient, the difference between the two treatments could be the gap between full remission and chronic illness. Yet, this promise comes with the danger of data dredging. If powerful computers hunt for patterns in massive data sets without a pre-specified model, they will inevitably find coincidences, spurious correlations like the color of a patient's socks. The risk of false positives and overfitting means a model might fit past data perfectly but fail every new patient. Precision requires even more fussiness, rigorous internal validation and theory-driven research rather than fishing expeditions. Fussiness is a scientific virtue. The field cannot afford to be lazy with words, timelines, measurements, or data. Sloppy language leads to sloppy thinking, and sloppy thinking leaves patients without the help they need. When the science is wrong, real people do not get better. The concept of treatment resistance is often viewed as a stubbornness of the patient's biology. However, it may simply be a statistical error. There may be no untreatable patients, only interactions and mechanisms that the field has not yet been fussy enough to measure. The failure is not in the patient, but in the current inability to find their specific key. This is the science of change, and the rules are only now beginning to be understood.